Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining. We are going to get started here in about 5 minutes. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining our MWMA Incident Management Update webinar. We are going to get started in just a couple of minutes here. While we still have a few folks joining us, let's go over a few Zoom tips today. If at any time during this webinar you do end up having trouble with audio, you can switch your audio to phone audio, and you can do that under your audio settings on your Zoom toolbar. You can also ask questions through the Q&A functionality also on your Zoom toolbar. We do encourage you to try to hold off on questions until the end of the webinar. We think we're going to be able to answer a lot of your questions throughout the next hour or so. So if you could just refrain from asking questions until the end. And when you do so, please use that Q&A functionality instead of the chat box. That just helps us keep track of everyone's questions and helps us get to as many as possible. And lastly, we do want to point out that our supported browsers for Zoom are Chrome, Firefox, or Edge. So those tend to work the best. Internet Explorer is not supported. And lastly, if you do have any technical issues, anything that you think we can help resolve for you, please go ahead and send us a chat, and one of the panelists will get with you and can help you out as best as possible. All right, once again, just want to say welcome to everyone. Thanks for joining our MWMA Incident Management Update training. So I wanted to start off by just letting everyone know why we're all here today. So we listened to a lot of feedback from you all over the past several months after our incident management go live last fall. And what we heard a lot was that you all wanted some streamlining of the incident reporting process. So that's really what this update is all about, is kind of streamlining the incident management workflow in MWMA. And what we mean by that, or by workflow, is just kind of the life cycle of how an incident moves through its life. So we're going to go over that here in a little bit. I also sent out a workflow document for you all to view throughout the session. So please feel free to pull that up and take a look as we go through some scenarios here. So again, we're here today to learn about some enhancements that are going into place to streamline our incident reporting process. Those enhancements are going into place on June 4th of this year. We do have a few goals for everyone today. Again, we want everyone to feel as comfortable as possible with the incident management workflow in MWMA. We want everyone to understand what exactly is changing as of June 4th. Again, the main update is the workflow, so how an incident moves throughout its life cycle. And I do want to point out that these new updates will apply for incidents that were reported after June 4th. So any incidents that were reported prior to June 4th will follow the current workflow. And lastly, our goal is to really help you understand your role in the larger incident reporting process. So we have a lot of different users with us today. We have direct service providers, we have case managers, some CHFS staff. And the goal is to be really transparent with everyone about the way incident reporting works and how an incident moves from one user to another. So that's another goal of ours, is to just help give you a big picture of what's happening when an incident is reported. So those are our main goals for the day. All right, a few housekeeping items. I do want to point out that we are going to have a few knowledge check questions throughout the session. Those will pop up on your screen and you can just click and answer for us. So just be sure to pay attention to those as they pop up. Again, we love to hear everyone's questions. Please use the Q&A functionality to ask any questions that you may have. Due to time, we'll most likely not answer those in real time, but instead at the end of this webinar, we do have some time that's reserved just for Q&A. Again, if possible, try to hold off on those questions until the end of the session, because we think we'll be able to answer quite a few of your questions. Again, our objectives for the day, we do want to just provide an overview of changes that are being made and that are going in on June 4th of this year. And we also really want you to have a good understanding of the incident management workflow, and again, how an incident kind of moves through its life cycle. And lastly, I do also want to point out that we have a quick post-training evaluation at the end of this session. It should take no more than 5 minutes, but we really value your all's time and really appreciate you all being here today. And your feedback is really important to us. We really use that to inform our future trainings, and it helps us to make these trainings even more effective and useful for you all. So if you do have 5 minutes at the end, we would love to hear your all's feedback. We'll provide you a link to do that at the very end of this session. All right, let's take a look at what our next hour and a half looks like. So again, we are going to start off with just an overview of incident management changes. So what is going to be changing as of June 4th. And then we're going to spend a little bit of time on the workflow. I did send out to, I think, everyone in attendance today, a workflow document that we'll be referencing throughout the session. Again, if you do have that, feel free to pull that up, print it out, and kind of follow along as we go through some scenarios. I think that'll be helpful. Next, we have a few incident reporting scenarios that are going to help illustrate our new workflow. So we're going to start off with a few scenarios where an incident is reported by a direct service provider. And then we have a couple of incidents that were reported by case managers. So again, we're just demonstrating the workflow and the changes through these scenarios. And then, as I mentioned, we will spend the last portion of the session going over your all's questions, and then we'll wrap things up for you all before we head out. All right, before we dive in, we're going to start off with just a little icebreaker. This is a way for everyone to practice using that polling functionality when we have our knowledge check questions. So I am going to pull that up for you all, and go ahead and let me know, what is your favorite genre of music? So throughout the session, our goal will be to get a very high participation on each one of these. Looks like you guys are starting off strong already. I'll typically give everyone about 1 minute to answer. All right, we'll give it about 15 more seconds. Looks like 84% of you have voted. That's awesome. All right, we'll go ahead and end our polling. And when I do these, I'll end it and then share the results with you all so you can see how everyone answered. So this is interesting. You all are the first group who has picked rock and roll over country. Looks like it was very close, but it looks like rock and roll kind of won there. Pretty cool to see. The other sessions chose country, so. But anyway, that's what our polling feature looks like, and you can be on the lookout for that throughout the session. All right, we're going to start off here by going over what exactly is changing as of June 4th of this year. Okay, so as I mentioned, the main thing that's changing is the workflow. Again, in workflow, we kind of mean how an incident moves through its life cycle, how it moves from one user group to another. So we're going to go over that quite a bit today. That's our main change. And again, the purpose of that is to streamline incident reporting. So with that, a few major changes. First, risk mitigation and investigation reports, or RMIRs, are no longer required for all incidents. So today, as you all know, those RMIRs are required for critical and non-critical incidents. And it doesn't always make sense to do those for every single incident. So in the spirit of streamlining, we're no longer doing RMIRs for all incidents, and we'll go over the specifics of that in a minute. Next, case managers only sign off on critical incidents through an independent case manager sign-off report. So similarly, today, case managers are signing off on all incidents, critical and non-critical, that were submitted by direct service providers. And to streamline that, that's no longer going to be the case, to kind of alleviate that workload a little bit. So that's another big change, and we'll go over the details here in a minute. Our last couple of changes, our internal users or CHFS staff are now prompted to review all critical incidents that require an RMIR through an incident review task. So the process that they're using to review incidents isn't changing. It's just going to be a little less manual for our CHFS staff now. And lastly, our CHFS fact-finding report is now able to give our internal users or CHFS staff the chance to do a quick review before they do a full CHFS fact-finding report. So again, those are our main updates, and we're going to illustrate those for you all in the next hour. So we've talked about what is changing. Let's go over what is not changing. The way incidents are classified in MWMA, that's not changing at all, right? So the way an incident is classified as either critical or non-critical, that is staying exactly the same as it is today. No updates there. So with that, that means no policy changes have been made. No logic has been changed in the way the system or MWMA determines if an incident is critical or non-critical. Everything's the same as far as that goes. Incident reporting and notification timelines are remaining the same. Case managers are still going to receive a notification when a direct service provider submits a non-critical incident report. I know that's a question that we've received quite a bit. Our incident review process for internal reviewers or CHFS staff, that is also staying the same. That's something that's done today, and that process is not changing with this update. And lastly, user access is staying the same. So what you have access to today is what you will have access to as of June 4th. So nothing as far as what you can and cannot view is being updated. All right. Now we do want to take some time to go over our workflow. So again, just want to give everyone an idea of what our incident reporting workflow is going to look like as of June 4th. So let's go ahead and dive right into that. Again, I did send out a document to everyone that has this exact workflow, just so you can follow along and make any notes. But we're going to just walk through a few scenarios with you all right now. So I am going to pull out my annotation tool. We're going to start here at the top with an incident reported by providers. So let's say a provider reports an incident and MWMA determines that the incident is non-critical. So if you just follow my little orange line there, you'll see that the incident is closed upon submission. So that looks a lot different than it does today. You'll notice that no RMIR is done. There's no case manager sign off. Since it's non-critical, it's able to be closed upon submission. So that's our simple scenario. Again, helps really streamline our process quite a bit. Now let's say that an incident was reported by a provider, and this time the incident is critical, right? So MWMA determines that the incident is critical. At this point, our providers will be prompted to indicate whether or not an RMIR is required. And we're going to go over what that screen looks like here in a bit. So let's say the provider, after kind of reviewing the incident, doesn't think that it could have been prevented and thinks that an RMIR is not necessary. In that case, the incident will just go right along for case manager sign off. So our case manager is going to review the incident. The case manager will see that it's a critical incident that's been submitted without an RMIR. And they can decide if they want to agree to sign off or not. Let's say our case manager does agree. They think an RMIR wasn't needed. They agree with the findings. They're going to agree to sign off, and that critical incident will then be downgraded to a non-critical incident and then closed. So let's back up here just a minute. So let's say we have the same situation, but our case manager does not agree to sign off. So they looked at the incident, maybe they don't agree with the incident report, or they feel that maybe we did need an RMIR. So if the case manager does not agree, at that point, a task is sent to our direct service provider supervisor to complete an RMIR. After the direct service provider supervisor completes the RMIR, it does go for case manager sign off once again. And then the case manager reviews the RMIR and can agree to sign off or not. If the case manager at this point still does not agree and they choose to not sign off, they'll perform a case manager fact finding. And upon submission, that incident will go for incident review by our CHFS staff. Similarly, if the case manager does agree to sign off, it just goes ahead and goes on for incident review by our CHFS staff. All right, and one final scenario to go over. So again, we are talking about an incident that's been reported by providers. MWMA determines that it is critical. So at this point, our provider is going to decide, is an RMIR required or not? Let's pretend in this case, the provider says, yes, I do think an RMIR is needed in this particular case. They will indicate that on the screen. And again, we'll show you the screen here in a bit. After they indicate that, yes, an RMIR is required, a task is then sent to our direct service provider supervisor to do the RMIR. Then the incident moves through as we kind of described in our last scenario. So I know this is a lot of information here, but again, would encourage you to look at your own version of this workflow and follow along as we go through a few incidents to kind of demonstrate the way that this works. All right, one more workflow for you all. This is for an incident that is submitted by a case manager or a case manager supervisor. Okay, so it's going to look very similar to what we just saw with a couple of differences. So again, let's say that an incident was reported by a case manager or supervisor. MWMA will determine if the incident is critical or non-critical. If the incident is non-critical, it's closed upon submission. That's pretty simple and easy there. If an incident is determined to be critical, our case manager or supervisor will decide, is an RMIR required or not? So very similar to what we just saw. If the answer is no, our case manager doesn't think we need an RMIR, the critical incident is then downgraded to non-critical and closed. Now let's say that our case manager decided an RMIR is required. Then the case manager or supervisor completes the RMIR, and upon submission, it goes to our CHFS staff for incident review. And then after that review, of course, the incident is closed. So once again, we are going to walk you through a couple of scenarios here to kind of illustrate these two workflows. And again, would encourage you all to look at your own workflow as we move throughout these scenarios. Okay, we're going to turn to a quick knowledge check here. An incident is initially determined to be critical or non-critical by. I'm going to pull that up for you in one moment. Okay, should be on your screen now. Go ahead and answer. An incident is initially determined to be critical or non-critical by. All right, we'll give it about 15 more seconds. 81% of you have voted, so awesome participation by everyone. All right, let's go ahead and end our poll and look at our results. So we had a mix of answers. The majority of you did get the answer right. It is MWMA. So just like today, MWMA determines if the incident is critical or non-critical initially. And it does that based on the information that you have input in the incident report. So again, no change there. MWMA does initially determine an incident to be critical or non-critical. Okay, a few notes for everyone before we dive into our incident reporting scenarios. We do have a wide kind of variety of roles joining us today. So if you don't mind, please pay attention to each scenario. We have them broken out into incidents that are reported by direct service providers and incidents reported by case managers. The incident scenarios kind of show various user roles throughout the process. So it's important to pay attention to each scenario, even if you're not a direct service provider or case manager. Next, a really important note is that our scenarios have been very simplified for training purposes. We know that in real life, we have a ton of variables that we have to think about. Things are going to change based on the incident criticality, on the information that you're reporting, even who started that initial report. And we recognize that our scenarios are very simplified for our training purposes. We also want to point out that our scenarios assume that you witnessed the incident, but in real life, we know that you're also required to report any incidents that are discovered. But just for our purposes, we're pretending that you've witnessed the incident. Next, I do want to note that we are assuming that most of you are familiar with the incident reporting process. If you are newer and maybe you're not familiar with how to complete the initial incident report, we do have a ton of materials that you can take advantage of. Those are located on TRIS and also on our YouTube page. We have a few videos for you to utilize. We're going to pick up our scenarios towards the very end of that initial incident report. So if you're not familiar with that and have questions or want to learn more, please feel free to check out those materials for us. Great, and with that, I'm going to turn over to my co-host Boyd. He is going to walk you through a few incident scenarios initiated by direct service providers.
Thanks so much, Hannah. So like Hannah said, she worked you guys through a general overview of what this new workflow is going to look like for incident reporting within MWMA. Now I'm going to walk you through a couple scenarios that are going to show you a more in-depth look of how that's going to look within MWMA. We're going to get started by a couple scenarios that were initiated by direct service providers. So before we jump into that, let's look at a few objectives for these scenarios. By the end of this module, we'd like for you guys to feel comfortable recording and submitting incidents within MWMA. We also want you to be able to determine when a risk mitigation and investigation report is required for an incident. And finally, you need to understand when incidents should be escalated to a case manager for their sign-off. So as we work through these three scenarios, just try to keep these main objectives in mind. All right, so a closer look at some of the scenarios we're going to look at. A reminder, all three of these have been initiated by a direct service provider who witnessed the initial incident. Scenario number one is just going to be a basic non-critical incident. Scenario two is going to be a critical incident where an RMIR was required or was not required, excuse me, and the case manager agreed to sign off. And scenario three is going to be a critical incident where the RMIR was required, but the case manager does not agree to sign off. So case manager is then going to complete a fact-finding report, which will create an incident review task for an internal reviewer, who's also the CHFS staff in your all's case, who will then complete the incident review before the incident is able to be closed. And just to kind of assist in working through these scenarios, we have a couple characters here that represent the different MWMA users. So hopefully you can identify your position with one of these characters, and it'll make it a little bit easier to follow along with our different scenarios that we have for you all. All right, so like I mentioned, scenario number one is just going to be a basic non-critical incident that was witnessed by a direct service provider, and then the incident is going to be closed. So let's go ahead and take a look at how that's going to look within MWMA. So for this first scenario, we have Angela. She is a direct service provider, and she witnessed an incident, and she is coming towards the end of filling out her initial incident report. So she's entered all the necessary information and filled out all of the category information, and she is ready to click submit on her incident report. So Angela's going to click submit, and she's going to see a new pop-up window notifying her that this incident has been classified as non-critical, and that because of that, it will be closed upon submission. So she reviews all the information that she's inputted. She's agreeing that, yes, this is a non-critical incident. So Angela's going to go ahead and click confirm that this incident can be closed upon submission. Once Angela clicks confirm, she's going to be taken back to her incident summary screen, and she can see on the left next to her incident report that it has been submitted. And on the far right side, you can see that it has been classified as non-critical. So based on the information she inputted, MWMA determined that this was a non-critical incident. And because of that, with the new workflow, she was able to just go ahead and close the incident. And please note that for case managers, when a direct service provider submits an incident report where it's classified as non-critical and closed, a case manager will still receive a notification that an incident report was submitted. So just a brief summary, this was a non-critical incident that could then be closed by a direct service provider. A couple key takeaways for you all from this. Just keep in mind that since this incident was classified as non-critical, the RMIR was not required and the incident could then be closed. And also, direct service providers do not need case manager sign off for non-critical incidents. Like I just said, the case manager will still receive a notification that the incident report was submitted, but they do not need to sign off on a non-critical incident. So let's move forward to our second knowledge check here. Let me go ahead and pull that up for you guys. The question is true or false? RMIRs are required for all incidents, both critical and non-critical. Here we go. Let's go ahead and launch that. So true or false? Risk mitigation and investigation reports are required for all incidents, both critical and non-critical. Great participation. We got about 75% of you guys have voted so far. Thank you all. We'll give you guys about 10 or 15 more seconds here to get your answers in. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the results. So true or false, RMIRs are required for all incidents. Looks like most of you guys got it right here. The answer is false. So RMIRs are only required for critical incidents, not all incidents. All right, let's take a look at our next scenario here. Once again, this is going to be a scenario where an incident was witnessed and submitted by a direct service provider. MWMA is going to classify this incident as critical based on the information entered, and the direct service provider is going to determine that an RMIR was not required for this incident. It's going to move on to the case manager, who will agree to sign off, and then the incident can be closed. So let's go ahead and take a look at what that will look like within MWMA. We're going to have Ernie here, and he is a direct service provider who witnessed the incident. He's just about finished entering all of the information for his incident report, and he's going to click next to proceed. And Ernie's going to see a new incident classification screen pop up. And this incident classification screen notifies him that the incident has been determined to be critical by MWMA, and it's asking him whether or not he thinks a risk mitigation and investigation report is required. So Ernie's going to use his knowledge of what happened with the incident, as well as whether or not he thinks it could have been prevented. And he's going to use his own professional judgment to determine whether or not he thinks a risk mitigation and investigation report is required. And so in this incident, he's going to select no based on his knowledge of what has happened before he clicks next. And just a quick note for you all, when you do see this screen, please keep in mind that any incidents involving suspected abuse, neglect, exploitation, or unexpected death will automatically require an RMIR to be submitted with the incident report. All right, so Ernie is going to click no, that an RMIR is not required, and he's going to click next to proceed. He'll then move on to the final page of his incident report, where he can upload any relevant documents relating to the incident, and he's going to go ahead and click submit to submit his incident report. And before we'll let him submit it, he's going to see another pop-up window notifying him that this is a critical incident and it's being submitted without a risk mitigation and investigation report. And MWMA is just going to confirm with him that he does want to submit it without an RMIR, and it's letting him know that this incident will then be downgraded to non-critical, meaning the incident can then be closed. So Ernie knows that he does not need a risk mitigation and investigation report, and it will then be downgraded to non-critical classification. So he's going to go ahead and click confirm to confirm that he would like to go ahead and submit this report. So once Ernie submitted that report, we're going to go to Maddie here, and she's a case manager. And on her dashboard, she sees a new case manager sign-off task pop up in her task queue. So she knows because Ernie submitted his incident report, she needs to go take a look at it and give her case manager sign off for that report. So she's going to click on that task, and she'll be taken to the incident summary screen. She can see that incident report that was previously submitted, and she sees her case manager sign off report is awaiting her initiation. So she's going to go ahead and click on the report or click initiate to begin. And on Maddie's case manager sign-off report, she's going to need to first review the details of what Ernie submitted in his initial incident report. And then she has to either agree or disagree on whether to sign off on the incident, which initially allows for it to be downgraded to non-critical and closed without an RMIR. So Maddie is going to agree to sign off on this report. She needs to enter any comments she may have from when she reviewed the incident report. And she also needs to check the box below, just confirming that she has reviewed this incident and provide her e-signature to once again confirm that she is agreeing with this incident submission. So after providing that e-signature, Maddie is going to go ahead and click next. She once again, just like Ernie, is going to have a chance to upload any relevant documents that she may have collected during her review and sign-off report. She's going to go ahead and upload anything she may have and click submit to finish up her case manager sign-off report. And before she is able to fully submit this report, she's going to see the same pop-up that Ernie saw, which is just notifying her that this is a critical incident. It's being signed off on without a risk mitigation and investigation report, and it is just letting her know that the incident will now be downgraded to non-critical classification and closed. So Maddie knows that this is what she wants to do. It's okay that the incident is being downgraded to non-critical. So she's going to go ahead and click confirm, and it will submit her report. Once she's submitted that, she'll be directed back to the incident summary screen, where she can see that her case manager sign-off report has now been submitted along with the initial incident report. And if you look on the far right side over here, you can also see that now this incident has been downgraded to a non-critical classification and closed. So just a brief summary of what we saw here in that scenario. We had a direct service provider submit an incident report, and that incident was classified as critical by MWMA. The direct service provider then determined that a risk mitigation and investigation report was not necessary for this incident, and it was then passed on to the case manager for their review and sign off. The case manager did decide to sign off in this scenario, so the incident was then downgraded to non-critical and closed. So just a couple key takeaways to keep in mind from this scenario. If a critical incident does not require an RMIR and the case manager does agree to sign off, the incident can then automatically be downgraded to non-critical and closed. And also, direct service providers do need case manager sign off for all incidents that are initially classified as critical. Just keep in mind, even if an RMIR is not required, the direct service provider must always get a case manager sign off for a critical incident. All right, let's go ahead and do our third knowledge check here. Our question is, who signs off on a direct service provider's incident report? We go ahead and launch that for you guys. Here we go. So who signs off on a direct service provider's incident report? All right, got about 75% of you guys have submitted your votes so far. Let's see if we can get up close to 100 here. We'll give you guys about 10 or 15 more seconds. All right, awesome. Let's go ahead and share these results with you guys. So who signs off on a direct service provider's incident report? That is the case manager. Good job. Most of you guys got that one right. We appreciate you guys participating in those knowledge checks. All right, let's take a look at our third and final scenario where an incident was reported by a direct service provider. So this one's going to be a bit complicated, so try to pay attention if you can. We are going to start out with a direct service provider who witnesses an incident and submits the initial incident report, same as the other previous two scenarios. And in this one, MWMA is going to classify the incident as critical. The DSP is going to determine that a risk mitigation and investigation report is required. And the case manager who reviews it is not going to agree to sign off. So keep in mind the difference from the previous scenario. That case manager is then going to complete a case manager fact-finding report. And once they complete that, it's going to generate an incident review task for internal reviewers, who is essentially the CHFS staff for you all. And they're going to complete their CHFS fact-finding report before the incident is able to be closed. Let's go ahead and dive in and see what this scenario is going to look like. We've got Julia here, and she's a direct service provider finishing up her initial incident report, and she is just about ready to submit it. She's going to click next. And Julia is going to see that incident classification screen that we saw in our last scenario. So this screen, once again, notifying her that the incident has been determined to be critical, and it's asking her whether or not she thinks a risk mitigation and investigation report is required. So she's going to use her own professional knowledge and her knowledge of what happened in the incident, and she's going to determine that, yes, she does think a risk mitigation and investigation report is required. So she's going to go ahead and click next. Once she uploads any relevant documents, she's going to click submit for that incident report, and she is going to be directed back to this incident summary screen. She's going to see that the incident report was submitted, And she can also see on the right side that it was classified as critical. So once Julia submitted her incident report, Lauren, her supervisor, is going to see a task pop up in her task queue, notifying her to complete the risk mitigation and investigation report. So once she clicks on that, she's directed to the same incident summary screen, and she's going to see that risk mitigation and investigation report is waiting to be initiated by her, the direct service provider supervisor. So Lauren, excuse me, is going to go ahead and click on that report to begin. And this report will look just like you all are used to it looking in MWMA. So you're familiar with each one of the sections and the categories that you must fill out, but Lauren must review all of the incident details in the initial incident report, and also provide any comments, documents, questions that she has about what occurred in that initial incident. So once she completes all sections of the RMIR, she can submit this report for the case manager to review and sign off on. So Lauren's going to go ahead and click submit on her risk mitigation and investigation report. And she is going to be directed back to the incident summary screen where Tom, our case manager, is going to take over. So just like the previous two users, he's going to receive a task on his dashboard to complete the case manager sign-off report. Once Tom clicks on that task, he'll be directed to the incident summary screen where he can see the previous two reports that have been submitted and also see that it is waiting on him to complete his case manager sign-off report. So Tom's going to go ahead and initiate that case manager sign-off report. And he must review the previous two reports and all of the information included within them to determine whether or not he thinks he agrees or disagrees with what's been reported and whether or not he wants to sign off on those reports. So Tom's going to review all those details, and after reviewing, he is going to decide to disagree. Oops, sorry about that. He is going to decide to disagree, and he needs to input comments explaining his reasoning for disagreeing with signing off on the RMIR and incident report. And just a quick note for you all, please note that if an RMIR was not completed, a task would be sent to the direct service provider supervisor to submit an RMIR. So similar to the last scenario, if an RMIR was not completed, but then the case manager reviews and does not agree to sign off, there will then be a task created for the supervisor, direct service provider supervisor, to go back and complete an RMIR. All right, so Tom has submitted his case manager fact-finding report, and he did not, or excuse me, Tom has not agreed to sign off. And so now he sees that he must complete his case manager fact-finding report. Once Tom sees that report populated on his incident summary screen, he's going to go ahead and click initiate to begin the fact-finding report. All right, so on Tom's fact-finding report, he must investigate the incident and review all the previous documents that have been submitted. He's going to record his findings and mark whether or not he agrees or disagrees with the outcome of the incident. Once he does that, he can go ahead and click next to move on, and he's going to have to record the fact-finding type and the date of the fact-finding that he looked into this incident before proceeding. So Tom enters that information, and he's going to go ahead and click next. The third screen is going to provide a space for Tom to record any people that he may have interviewed about the incident and any findings that he discovered during those interviews. He's going to click next to proceed, and he has a page where he can record any information that he collected during his report about the scene and the evidence that was collected, really anything that was involved in the incident that he thinks is relevant, he's going to record here, and then he can click next. Finally, Tom has a page similar to the previous reports where he can upload and attach any relevant documents to this specific incident. So now that Tom has completed all of the different sections of his case manager fact-finding report, he is ready to click submit. And he sees a pop-up notification that's notifying him that once he submits his case manager fact-finding report, it's going to create an incident review task for CHFS users to review this incident. So once he submits and hits confirm, we are going to switch to Rachel. And Rachel is that CHFS staff member. She's an internal incident reviewer, and she receives a new task on her dashboard to complete the CHFS fact-finding report. So once Rachel clicks on that task, she's taken to the incident summary screen. She can see that all of the necessary documents have been submitted beforehand, and it is now her turn to complete the CHFS fact-finding report. So she's going to click initiate to begin. And Rachel needs to review all the previous reports, use her own knowledge to determine whether or not she thinks a complete CHFS fact-finding report is required. So she's essentially conducting an internal review and then needs to decide if this entire fact-finding report is required. And for this specific scenario, Rachel does think that, yes, I do need to complete a full CHFS fact-finding report. So she's going to mark yes and click next. And she's going to then work through her CHFS fact-finding report. She needs to record the type and date of when she completed the fact-finding report, as well as whether or not she thinks any additional information is required. She's going to click next, and she also has a space to record any people that she may have interviewed during this review process. She's going to enter their name and any information that she may have gotten from them before clicking next. And she also has an evidence screen to record any findings that she may have found during her review of the initial incident. She'll click next, and this is where she needs to record the outcome of her fact-finding report. So she's got a box where she can write anything that she may have found and from her analysis of the initial incident, along with the previous reports. She's going to write her notes there, and then she needs to determine whether or not this incident can be closed. And so after Rachel has had a chance to review all the previous documents, really take a good close look at what occurred during this incident, she's going to decide that, yes, this incident can be closed. So Rachel's going to click yes and click next. She can upload any relevant documents, and she is now ready to submit her CHFS fact-finding report. So Rachel clicks submit, and she is taken back to the incident summary screen. You can see here on the left side that all of the necessary reports have been submitted for this incident. It was classified as critical, so we had to go through the entire workflow to ensure that everyone had reviewed properly and submitted the necessary reports. So Rachel has now submitted her final CHFS fact-finding report, and this incident has been closed. So just a few key takeaways. We just went through a brief summary of what happened, but just keep in mind that from this scenario, if a case manager does not agree to sign off on a direct service provider's incident report, they must complete the case manager fact-finding report. So kind of like I pointed out there, after the RMIR has been submitted and they did not agree to sign off, they had to complete their case manager fact-finding report. And second, incident review tasks for internal users, who are you all, the CHFS staff, are generated for all critical incidents where an RMIR is completed. So just keep that in mind here. And let's go ahead and do our next knowledge check. Here we go. So we have incident review tasks are generated for what? Go ahead and launch that for you guys here. So incident review tasks are generated for which type of incident? Got about 70% of answers so far. Give you guys about 30 more seconds. All right, we're going to go ahead and end the polling here. So let's see, incident review tasks are generated for critical incidents with an RMIR. Great job. Most of you guys got that one right here. So just keep that in mind. If an incident review task is generated, that is because the incident was initially classified as critical and an RMIR was submitted for that incident. So good job paying attention there, guys. And now I'm going to pass it back to my co-host Hannah, and she is going to go through two brief scenarios with you guys where incident reports were initiated by case managers. So I'll pass it back to you, Hannah.
Thanks, Boyd. All right, let's take a look at a couple of additional scenarios. Very similar objectives for these scenarios, just kind of showing you what our workflow looks like for incidents that are submitted by a case manager. So let's go ahead and look at an overview of our two scenarios. So both are going to be critical incidents. Scenario 4 and 5, we have, again, a few characters that we're going to use throughout these scenarios. We have Maddie, a case manager, Katie, an internal reviewer who is a member of the CHFS staff, and then we have Arnold, a case manager. So let's go ahead and look at an overview of scenario number 4. All right, so in this scenario, our case manager witnesses an incident and submits an incident report. MWMA classifies the incident as critical. And then our case manager is going to determine that a risk mitigation and investigation report is required. So our case manager is going to do that report. Upon submission, that incident is sent for incident review, and then the incident is closed. So let's go ahead and take a look at this one. Okay, so we have Maddie here. She's a case manager, and she recently witnessed an incident. So Maddie has gone through all of her incident reporting screens, and she is just about ready to submit her incident. So again, we're at the very end of that initial incident report. So Maddie clicks next to move on, and she sees this new screen that she has not seen before. And this is our incident classification screen. So this screen is asking Maddie if she would like to do a risk mitigation and investigation report. So the screen is letting her know that the incident has been determined to be critical and is asking her if an RMIR is required. So Maddie, using her own professional judgment, determines that an RMIR is required. So on the screen, Maddie is going to select yes, and then Maddie's going to move along through the screen flow by clicking next. Okay, so since Maddie did indicate that an RMIR is required, she will also complete the risk mitigation and investigation report. All right, so since Maddie's a case manager and she's the one who reported the incident, she'll also do that RMIR. So Maddie initiates that report. She completes the RMIR. She gets all the way to the bottom of that report. And right as she's about to submit, she gets a pop-up. And it lets her know that an incident review task will be generated for a CHFS user to review the incident. So Maddie knows that after she clicks submit, the incident will move right along for incident review by our CHFS internal reviewer. So Maddie is good with this, so she clicks confirm. Right, and then this is Katie here. She is our internal reviewer. She's a CHFS staff. And she got a task on her dashboard to review an incident. So Katie clicks start on that task, and she's taken to the incident summary screen that you see here. So what Katie is going to do is review all of the documents associated with the incident, just like she would do today. So she's going to look at that incident report. She'll look at the RMIR. And when she's ready, she'll initiate that CHFS fact-finding report. So Katie goes through that report. She can decide to do like a full CHFS fact-finding report if she feels that it's necessary. If not, she could just kind of close out the incident, indicate that it's good to go. Either way, Katie completes her task. She's reviewed the incident, and the incident is closed. So a few key takeaways here. So in this scenario, our case manager submitted an incident report that was classified as critical. So our case manager did determine that an RMIR is required. So our case manager completed that report. And then it was sent along for incident review by our internal user. And then the incident was closed. So our two key takeaways: case managers are responsible for completing the RMIR if it is required, just like it is today. And then incidents with an RMIR are sent for incident review by internal users, our CHFS staff. So another key takeaway there. All right, this is our last scenario of the day, so hang with me. A quick overview. And this time we have another case manager who witnesses an incident and submits an incident report. Once again, MWMA is going to classify this incident as critical. Only this time, our case manager decides that a risk mitigation and investigation report is not required. So our case manager is going to indicate that on the screen. And upon submission, the incident is closed because the case manager indicated that an RMIR is not required. So it was downgraded to non-critical and then closed. Then a few weeks later, we have an internal reviewer who maybe received some new information about this incident, and they go and look through the incident and they notice that an RMIR wasn't done. And given the new information, our internal reviewer thinks that it would be good to reopen this incident. So they're going to actually request that an RMIR be done. Okay, let's dive in here. We have Arnold. He is a case manager and he recently witnessed an incident. So Arnold has gone through all of those incident reporting screens and he's made it almost to the very end. He's entered in all of his information and he is going to click next. So Arnold sees this incident classification screen that he has not seen before. And again, this screen is letting Arnold know that the incident has been classified as critical. And it's asking Arnold, is a risk mitigation and investigation report required? So Arnold thinks about the incident. He uses his own judgment to determine that an RMIR is not required. So Arnold is going to select no on that screen and he'll move along. He's now filled out all of the incident reporting screens that he needs to, and he is ready to submit his report. So he clicks submit there. And again, Arnold gets a pop-up. And this pop-up lets Arnold know that a critical incident is being submitted without an RMIR. So this notification lets him know that the incident will be downgraded to non-critical and then closed. So again, Arnold indicated that an RMIR was not necessary. So upon submission, the incident will be downgraded to non-critical and closed. Then let's pretend a few weeks later, Katie here, our internal reviewer, gets some new information about that particular incident. So Katie, after looking at the new information, she thinks that maybe we should have done an RMIR and she would like for an RMIR to be completed on that particular incident. So Katie has the ability to actually open up the incident again by requesting a risk mitigation and investigation report. So Katie, on her incident summary screen as a CHFS staff member, is able to do that. So she clicks request risk mitigation and investigation report. Katie gets a quick pop-up. This lets her know that a task will be created for Arnold, our case manager, to submit a risk mitigation and investigation report. And I do want to point out that this process is similar for an incident that's submitted by a direct service provider, right? So if this incident had been initially submitted by a direct service provider without an RMIR and it ended up being closed after our case manager reviewed it, an internal reviewer could request that an RMIR be done. In that case, the same thing would happen. The incident would be reopened, only instead of the task going to a case manager for an RMIR, it would go to our direct service provider supervisor. So just wanted to point that out. All right, so Katie has requested the RMIR, and Arnold, our case manager, since he's the one who submitted the incident report, he is going to receive that RMIR task. So again, the incident was reopened. You'll see that the incident status at the top indicates that, and Arnold is able to then initiate his RMIR and can complete that report. After Arnold is done with that RMIR, the incident continues to move through its normal workflow and it can eventually be closed. All right, so a summary of what we just saw. We had our case manager, Arnold, who submitted an incident report, and that incident was classified as critical by MWMA. Arnold decided that an RMIR was not required, so upon submission, the incident was downgraded to non-critical and closed. A few weeks later, our internal reviewer, Katie, wanted to reopen the incident, and she actually requested that Arnold complete an RMIR. So the incident was reopened, Arnold completed the RMIR, and then the incident was eventually closed. So our main takeaway here, if an internal reviewer requests that an RMIR be done after an incident has been closed, the incident will reopen and a task will be created for the appropriate user group. All right, our final knowledge check question of the day. Who can request an RMIR after an incident has been closed? I'm going to pull up that poll question for everyone. All right, again, who can request an RMIR after an incident has been closed? We'll give everyone about a minute here. All right, we've got a lot of answers coming in. All right, we'll give it about 15 more seconds or so. Almost 80% of you voting. That's awesome. Thanks for participating. Okay, we'll go ahead and end it here and I'll share these results. Looks like almost all of you got this answer correct. It is our internal reviewers or our CHFS staff who can request an RMIR after an incident has been closed. Great job, you all. All right. We are now going to turn it over to questions. If you would, go ahead and put any questions that you have in our Q&A functionality. We have Alicia Clark on the line. I'm going to pass it over to Alicia to introduce herself and answer your all's questions.
Thanks, Hannah. My name is Alicia Clark. I'm the Assistant Director for the Division of Community Alternatives, and I'm here today to answer any questions you may have. I hope that this training was very direct and to the point. I'm hoping that, when we first started this process of putting in everything in electronically, before the electronic process, all the non-criticals were kept at the provider agencies. And then once we put them in the system, it caused a lot of work for everybody involved. But I know we heard some concerns from our case managers thinking that they, a lot more was put on them, having to review every single incident. Yes, I do know that they're notified of those. But we started looking, and with we are approved through our applications through the waiver process. Everybody, if it's a critical incident, then we have to review that. We've got to do further investigation. And so we were trying to ultimately make this process a little easier for everybody involved and streamline it some. So I will go through and answer questions you have today. And then one of the questions is, will an email be sent to the case manager or direct service provider supervisor when there's a task waiting in MWMA? That process is going to work the same as it does today. You should be getting in there, looking at the task. For the direct service provider supervisors, it goes to that queue. But nothing's changing with that. It's really changing about what is that's having to be looked at through multiple reviews. And those are those critical incidents. Has the notification to DCBS for critical incidents, reportable incidents gone live yet? They are still working on that system, and that has not gone live yet. But for the sake of, you know, what we are supposed to do in mandatory reporters here in Kentucky, please continue to report any reportable incidents or scenarios to DCBS, obviously to the police, anybody that needs to be notified. Please continue to report those like you are today. Let's see the next one. If a DSP thinks a risk mitigation investigation report is not required, but the case manager disagrees, then the direct service provider is required to complete the risk mitigation investigation report. In that scenario, the risk mitigation investigation report needs to be submitted within 7 days of what date? So it's going to be when that task is sent back to you. So when that task is created, then you do have 7 days. And I know somebody had asked earlier about, they had said 7 business days. Just want to make sure that everybody knows it's 7 calendar days. Another thing that I'm also encouraging everybody to do, because I do know that sometimes there is turnover. I definitely understand that. It's a training point for everybody, but there is a lot of information out there on the Division of Community Alternatives website about the incident reporting. We do have that incident reporting guide out there. Please, somebody had asked the question, what do you mean that MWMA decides whether it's critical or non-critical? You know, that's, the system is basically designed and coded based on the categories and the subcategories, the answers to those, and all that information is in there. So based on what you put, you should know whether it's going to be a critical or non-critical. So go out there, review that. If you've not participated in the other trainings, please go out, review those. Everything's out there. If you have questions, let us know. Let your operating agency know. We are all here to help you in that. Another question is, DSPs still need to notify case managers and guardians prior to submission of any incident report in MWMA. Yeah, I mean, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to make sure that the health, safety, and welfare of that person is totally addressed before you start notifying everybody. That is the absolute main thing. But then, yes, go ahead. You're going to contact the case managers, you're going to contact guardians, and then you're going to put that information within your incident report of your date and time that you contacted them. And there was another, and I can't believe it kind of just went out of my mind of something I was going to tell you. Oh, there was another thing that kind of came through to us through the chat about suspected abuse, and does that include peer-on-peer aggression? I'm not sure, you know, I don't want to speak for everybody, but, you know, that could be behaviors. But if you have a question about that and a specific scenario, then please reach out to your operating agency so that they can assist you, whether it be DMS, Department for Aging and Independent Living, and the Department for Behavioral Health, and that group. We have all worked together, so no decisions are made, you know, on one group. We all come together. We have JAD sessions in order to make the system better for you all. So they have that information as well. So anytime, and I'm also telling people, because we've had the question about, give me a very specific scenario of when a risk mitigation investigation report isn't required. I hesitate going and giving you very specific scenarios, because as you know, and I know, that we both could end up in the hospital, but it can be for very different things. Or we both could fall. It could be for very different situations. But one of the ones that I've said to people, you know, I have reviewed critical incidents on kids going and getting treatment for strep throat. Kids are going to get strep throat. It happens. Is there anything that you could have really done to prevent that? No. So I wouldn't see the necessary pieces to go in and do a big long investigation on that, because there's nothing that could have been done to prevent that. Now, if you go in and, like some people, a gallbladder, people are going to have gallbladder attacks. They're going to have surgery. I mean, I'm sure if you haven't had your gallbladder out yourself, you know of somebody who has. It just happens. But if you have somebody that went in with a stroke and their medications, they were on blood thinner medications and none of those were given to them for, a week, that could have led to that stroke. So absolutely, medication shouldn't have been missed. So there would need to be further investigation to those. So I do hesitate on giving very specific scenarios of, yes, it's required for this situation, but not for this situation. We've all talked amongst our, we call them sister agencies. We're a big collective group, and we are here to help. If you all have questions, reach out to the one that is providing the oversight to you all and ask them. And I tell everybody, if it's a gray area that you think, maybe it should be done, go ahead and do it. There is no hurt, no harm in completing a risk mitigation investigation report. We were just ultimately really trying to make it as easy on providers and everybody involved as possible, but still ensuring that we are doing what we are supposed to through the approved waivers by CMS. And I know one person had asked if the direct service provider does not think that a risk mitigation investigation report is necessary and the case manager disagrees, then it says the direct service provider must complete that risk mitigation investigation report. And yes, that is correct. So, it does take communication. We want everybody to communicate. And what they would do is say that they disagree. And if a risk mitigation investigation report has not been completed, it is going to create that task into that direct service provider supervisor queue of that provider agency. Somebody has asked if they can have a list of all direct service provider supervisors listed for their agency. Josh, I will take this back to our team and we will reach out to you offline from this training. Right now, there are no other open questions. So I don't want to keep you here. I know everybody's time is valuable. However, we are here if you do have questions, even after today. If you think of something, reach out to your operating agency. I know I've worked a lot with Kathy and her group down at DBHDID, also Tanya and that group as well with Dale. But we want you to continue asking questions and try to assist you all in any way that we can. I hope this has been helpful, especially to our case managers who were getting lots of tasks for things that they previously didn't have to review. Although yes, they are notified and they should continue to be notified through the process when an incident happens. But I hope this helps streamline for everybody. I know risk mitigation investigation was a big thing for non-criticals and concerns that we heard. So I hope this is definitely a welcome change for you all. And if there are no other questions right now, I will go ahead and I will turn it back over to Hannah. I know she's got a few last minute details that she wants to go over with you all, but we will remain on the line here until 2:30 for any other questions that may come in.
Thanks, Alicia, and thanks for answering all those questions for us. A few items before you all go. We do want to let you know that we have a lot of resources available for you to reference even after this training. We've developed 3 new QRGs for this incident management update. We also have made updates to that frequently asked questions document. So our past FAQ has been updated to reflect changes that are going in on June 4th. And lastly, we do have a series of micro videos on our YouTube page if anyone needs additional guidance on just kind of general incident reporting. We will be sending out those materials and a copy of this slideshow for you all to reference. So be on the lookout for that in the next few days or so. Right, a few quick reminders. Our go live is June 4th. So all of these updates that we've discussed will go in on June 4th of this year. We do want to point out that the new workflow we discussed today will only apply for incidents that were started after June 4th. So any incidents that were reported prior to June 4th are going to follow the existing workflow. So that's a really important distinction to note. Again, we have several MWMA reference materials available. Those are located on TRIS. Again, we'll be sending out links to those in the next week or so. Lastly, we do have a training evaluation survey that we would love for you all to complete. This also gives you an opportunity to ask any additional questions that you may have. So please take the next 5 minutes or so to fill that out for us. So we'll go ahead on the next slide. We have our training evaluation. You will not be able to click on the link on the slide. I'm going to put that in the chat for you. So should have just sent it. If you would not mind just going to your chat box, clicking that link and taking the next 5 minutes to give us some feedback. Again, we really value your all's time. We're really happy that you all are here with us today. And we do want to know what you found helpful, what wasn't helpful, and things we can do in the future to help improve training. Again, we really appreciate you all joining us today. And on behalf of the entire team, again, just want to thank you for taking your time to go through this training with us. After you're done with the evaluation, you're welcome to log off. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day and a great Memorial Day weekend. Thanks, you all.
In the link, somebody said that they were not seeing the link. The link is over there in the chat. So if you have the chat pulled up, you should be able to see that. If not, please let me know. And then somebody has also asked if they have a question in the future, to which address could they send those questions to. About incident reporting, please submit those to your operating agency who oversees the programs in which you serve. So for SCL and Michelle P. Waiver, you can reach out to your QA with DBHDID. With your PDS or HCB, you can reach out to the Department for Aging and Independent Living. And then for your ABI waivers, those are going to be the Department for Medicaid. Okay, it looks like the person that couldn't see it can see it now. So if anybody else is having issues, please just let us know. And if we need to, we can put it in the Q&A as well. Somebody has asked if we could provide a list of who we contact for what again. So for HCB and for your PDS questions, The Department for Aging and Independent Living is who provides the oversight. For Michelle P. and SCL, DBH-DID provides that oversight. And then your AVI waivers, that is going to be the Department for Medicaid. And you can always, if you're not sure who to reach out to, who the operating agency is, you can always send your question to the 1915C mailbox that we have available, and we can direct you who to contact. And I know somebody has said that it wouldn't let them on. Just want to make sure again that you all are not trying to click the training evaluation link on the PowerPoint, that you are trying to click that through the chat.